Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I want to welcome you to this month's P&G Alumni Network Enrichment Series webinars. I'm your host, Ileana Rojas, and I hope you're all safe and well. Today, we have a wonderful guest. However, before we start our conversation, I do want to tell you a little bit about the Enrichment Series. This is a monthly series where our goal is to connect members and provide enriching content where we hope you learn something new and leave you inspired. And we do this by leveraging the expertise that we have within this network. All of this is part of a bigger mission of the P&G Alumni Network, which is formed by former P&G employees to share ideas, talents, and resources with each other and our communities and our philanthropy efforts. We have more than 35,000 registered members in 45 chapters around the world, and the P&G Alumni Network is also recognized by Procter & Gamble. We connect via global conferences, local chapters, industry events, and online content. And our nonprofit foundation supports economic empowerment initiatives in communities around the world. And talking about our nonprofit foundation, this month we just celebrated International Women's Day back in March 8th, and we're going to continue to celebrate women throughout. We have a campaign that I don't know if you've seen, but I invite you to see it throughout all of our social media platforms called Unsung Heroes, where we're celebrating mentors, friends, coaches, volunteers, and many women who often go unrecognized, but are making the world a better place. So check it out and support and share the spotlight. Also, the P&G Fund for Gender Equality is matching all donations to the Alumni Foundation up to $50,000 for second year in a row. So therefore doubling the impact. So please consider donating to the Alumni Foundation. You can do that by scanning the QR code that's on your screen or by visiting pngalumnifoundation.org. Thank you, everybody, for supporting this incredible effort and campaign. Also wanted to share, if you go into our P&G alumni website, you can see the upcoming events around the world. This continues to grow. We definitely have a lot of events happening to connect with each other. So make sure you do not miss any of them. And save the date for our global conference. This conference happens every other year. So this year it will happen in Washington, D.C., November 2nd to November 4th. It will be in person in the Renaissance Hotel downtown in Washington. So sign up already and wait for our newsletters where you'll see all the information as we get closer to the date. Welcome. Perfect.
So, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Warm welcome from my side as well. My name is Anke Buttler. I'm the Group CFO of Schwan Stabilo, and I have the pleasure to lead you today through my experiences on how to lead people through change, climbing mountains. Let me start with giving you a little bit of personal background. I'm married, we have 2 girls, and we very much like going on vacation to Bavaria. And that's very closely linked to my motto later on. I've spent 18 years at P&G Finance in various local, regional, and global roles, both in Germany and Switzerland, and then moved over to KOTTER. When P&G sold its beauty business to KOTTER, I moved over as a finance CFO for DACH. And since January 23, so basically starting 2 months ago, I joined Schwan Stabilo, which is a 100% family-owned German company. You may know some of the brands. It's 3 divisions. It's on the left, writing. You may know the Boss. Then in the middle, it's outdoor branch. And on the right, it's cosmetics business serving customers like Coty or L'Oreal. Yeah, so that's from a private and personal background. I'm more than happy to lead you through my presentation on climbing mountains, how to lead people through change. Before I go into my personal experience, let me share some some theory, you know, any change, any perception of change is very personal. So there may be people who very fast jump onto change. Some people have a bit more difficulties. And this is one of the curves. There's many more models. You know, you start, and I just to give a little example where I realized change for the first time. P&G at the old times, we still had our telephone books printed out in paper. And then, you know, part of digital transformation in the early stages, P&G decided to stop printing, having a phone book, but have everything in the intranet. And at the beginning, I was very much in denial phase. How on earth? I need my printed. So then the next phase was I was resisting and really printing by myself, even though it wasn't distributed anymore. I was printing my own phone book because I really wanted to. I wanted to write my notes from my special colleagues, to have a very close look and have all the key phone numbers ready on my desk. Then I realized, I'm somehow not, this is not going away. I started to explore. So I was in the neutral zone, started to explore. And you know that it's much faster finding telephones from colleagues all around the world on the intranet and not having it printed on my desk, especially when there's a lot of new people coming in. And obviously now with Teams, you know, and telephone moving over to the internet, everything is much more handy, as opposed to having my old printed phone book. But that was a little example for me showcasing, I am going as well through change. And the change curve is very different for people. Some people may have a roller coaster of change, you know, and understanding these curves of change is very important. And to quote a very big expert in this area, John KOTTER, the heart of change is in the emotions. And I'll lead you through 3 examples from my personal professional life experience, you know, why I think it's very much important to know and understand that, and then how to best incorporate that when you as a leader want to drive or implement change. Now, before we go into the examples, a little bit more of theory from John P. KOTTER, who was a professor of leadership at Harvard Business School, and he basically invented the 8-step process for leading change. And I'll briefly lead you through. First, and that's also what I've learned at P&G, you know, how to structure a change process. First, you need to create the climate for change. What is your engagement plan? What's your vision? You need to envision people. You need to create a sense of urgency. Not everybody may have realized that turnover is not as steep as in the past Corona phases, that we need to move more into cost cutting potentially. You need to have you need to build a guiding coalition. If you are the only one driving this change, it surely will fail. So be clear who are your stakeholders and align them on driving this change. And one element that I would want to specifically deep dive on is you better create a compelling vision or a visual or something that people can stick to when they're going through their personal changes and change curves. So that's the first bucket, create the climate for change. Second one is then it's going into lead the change. There it's very important to energize and enable your teams. And most importantly, from my personal experience, is you need to have volunteers and change agents. And I'll explain you the concept of change agents, where I realized that's pretty critical or important to help you be successful in your change. Also important in this phase is you need to enable action by removing barriers, be it resource constraints, too many projects at the same time, people being distracted, etc. Also very important that you do not forget to generate short-term wins. And sometimes maybe even over-celebrate some small wins during your change curve to ensure that people stick to it and really are energized that you're moving forward in the right direction. So, and then the third bucket, bucket of change, operationalize the change. Then it's moving into execution. How can you sustain acceleration? And more importantly, how to institute change so that you're really working towards significant change efforts. So those are the 3 big, phases of change: create the climate for change, lead the change, and operationalize the change. And I would want to start with creating a vision. And, what was my personal experience, how to best create a vision and create the climate for change and create a vision and regularly communicate the vision. Because that's also even more important. Yes, you have a vision and then it's stuck somewhere in your cupboard. So let me give you a bit of personal background on this first very important element during my history. In 2016, as I said, I joined P&G sold its beauty business to KOTTER. Globally, KOTTER, a cosmetics company, more than doubled the number of employees and complexity, and also turnover. So it was a huge undertaking, clearly a big step forward. The deal included several brands that you may know, Vela, Max Factor, CoverGirl in the US, and also luxury perfumery like Hugo Boss, Gucci, or Marc Jacobs. In Germany, where I was asked to lead the finance integration, two very diverse organizations moved together, and I led the integration. And why diverse organizations? On the one hand, it was a finance team with very strong accounting and tax expertise and really long-term strong expertise in that area. And one finance team with very strong controlling and financial leadership expertise. So you may say, hey, super, it's very perfect fit, looking at diverse teams and how to best combine the strengths of both teams. Important aspect, KOTTER bought the P&G beauty business. However, majority of DACH leadership, especially in finance, came from P&G. The office location was then the formerly known P&G location, and also IT system more or less was taken from P&G. And let me give you a bit more details on that one, because it was very important for this emotional aspect of leading the change. The office location, the KOTTER employees were located in Darmstadt, which is close to Frankfurt. And the P&G beauty business, as part of P&G overall, it was close to Frankfurt as well. So overall, very close by. But then the decision was to move to a joint third location, which was the former Vela office, which was located in Darmstadt. So the KOTTER folks being located in Mainz, sorry, I think there was a mistake, being located in Mainz at the beginning, had to relocate after a certain period of time to the previously perceived P&G offices being in Darmstadt, the Vela offices. And also the IT system, both companies had SAP, but nevertheless, the breadth and the complexity of SAP was more or less taken over from P&G, as KOTTER doubled its complexity as well. So those were quite significant elements to understand a little bit the change that some of our people, also not only from the P&G folks that were sold, but also from KOTTER employees, even though they were buying the P&G business. Now, as some of you who went through post-merger integrations surely understand that, these kind of projects are always done under huge stress timings. There's a lot of projects that need to happen in parallel. The whole order shipping billing integration needs to happen. In parallel, P&G still did transitional services for KOTTER, which is basically P&G performed the majority of accounting processes for KOTTER for 9 months. The number of legal entities doubled or more than doubled from 5 to more than 10, which clearly quadrupled the complexity from a finance supply chain complexity. Because you had to serve several legal entities, costs were flowing into several legal entities. At the same time, obviously, you want to improve your business from a cost and profit point of view, as you have the promised synergies. And you want to also focus on accelerating the turnover. So in a nutshell, we had various changes in systems and processes that people had to work on and had to digest and had to get over it and master. Also, a big change in way of doing business for both sides, both for the KOTTER employees, but also for P&G employees. And also quite a significant amount of leadership and team changes. So, when you look back and its change is very personal, for the individual, there were a lot of changes going on. So clearly the question how to create a vision for both finance teams and lead people through change and a lot of uncertainty. And how did we then try to solve that and help people to guide through that? We came up with the visual of, hey, we are climbing mountains. There's so many projects, we hardly know how to get up to the mountains. And clearly our big vision was to, and maybe sounds very simple, but the key underlying factor was we need to become one finance team with all our diverse backgrounds to ensure that we best work together. Because in the end, everybody had the same interest, jointly working together. So at the beginning, we didn't really know where to go and who should do what. Yeah. So we always communicated, did several workshops. We came from different directions. Clearly, KOTTER, P&G, newcomers. We had lots of newcomers as well. And in some ways, we always knew different ways to the summit. How you analyze actuals, how you do your forecasting. You know, there is never a one perfect way, but how to get to the summit. And also what we constantly did, we linked everything to climbing activities, to at least give in our communications and in our regular town halls that we give continuously communicate. We want to reach jointly to this peak of being one finance team, so that we always link team activities as much as possible to this joint vision. We want to climb the mountains together. Sometimes there were also phases of smooth climbing, that it's much nicer to walk, and that we acknowledged as well. People need to take vacation, recharge their batteries before then climbing to the next mountain. And also on this way, and I'll come to that later on, we had quite a significant, journey as well to peak when KOTTER decided to sell Vela to a private equity investor. And as you can see here again, then we said, let's link it always to this mountain visual. We are here at the plateau. We jointly went that far, and now we are moving into different piles, and we've split up the organization into the KOTTER business and into the Vela business. And also very key during this whole phase, as I said before, you constantly need to celebrate successes. We over-communicated our vision. We, as I said, sometimes even over-celebrated small steps and also small successes, mini projects, to ensure that, the whole organization stays behind us, and more importantly, is very proud of the progress. Because I realized as well that so many activities were going on in this post-merger integration that the whole organization could really be proud of how many mountains we have already climbed. So this was for how to best create the climate for change, and give you one example of how I try to create a vision and constantly communicate to our organization to keep everybody motivated on that journey. Moving now to the second example, how to lead the change. And here I would want to give you one example of how important it is to get a volunteer army, or the concept of change agents. How I realized how important having one or two change agents is to really deliver your change into the organization. Again, let me start on providing a bit of background. As part of any post-merger integration, usually, there also needs to happen, or sometimes is happening, restructuring to deliver the promised cost synergies. There was a global decision to deliver synergies and move parts of accounting department to a shared service center. Several accounting departments were impacted, especially one team where all roles were expected to be eliminated in Germany and relocated to a shared service center. A little bit of background to this team. It was a very strong team with long company heritage and always very good results. So from a pure local perspective, you could argue, why do we need to outsource? The team has a very strong expertise, very committed team, was always delivering on its results and delivered productivity year on year. So why, from a local perspective, why do we need to move to a shared service center? As usual, this was in a critical business phase. It's always, these kind of projects always come on top of base business. So it was very key to ensure that the knowledge transfer takes place, that we ensure full business continuity post the transition to the shared service center, and at the same time, obviously, continue with the base business and not completely, have this team be frustrated with their team colleagues and potentially also jeopardize the base business. So here, the key question was, in leading the change, how to ensure that neither the team leader of this impacted team nor the full accounting team would resign nor get sick, which often or sometimes happens in these cases, when people get understandably fully frustrated of, when they realize their roles get outsourced, or even completely boycott the knowledge transfer to a shared service center. So how to best manage that? And these kind of projects is never easy, and especially for the impacted people. So relatively easy, I realized, I need change agents. I need somebody to help drive this project. So I realized that my team leader, Tim, may be key in this whole lead the change journey. And let me give you a little bit of background on Tim. Tim had a very successful career so far, was very committed, was very proud of his team. They had done a lot of team efforts, was a very strong team spirit in his team. They already went jointly through several smaller rounds of productivity phases, constantly upgrading their results. He just recently had bought a house. So personally as well, he was feeling quite uncertain about the whole outsourcing activities when he was informally informed already. So he was confidentially informed. He big time pushed back. He was getting very negative. Understandably, he challenged, on behalf of his team, why do we really need to outsource? Couldn't we optimize our processes with a strong expertise locally? And only after, with long discussions, and really taking the time personally on convincing him that sometimes as a leader, we need to execute difficult choices from a company. And then it's not about the what, but rather how we lead the change. That he would be such an asset for his team as well if he would lead this transition in a constructive, in a positive way, as opposed to boycotting or confronting where a decision had already been made. So suddenly you could realize that he was flipping and that he was getting a very positive, not a positive person about the decision per se, but that he was really getting into the details, understanding how the whole, what could be the benefits of it, understanding the new tools and systems that could then in the end help improve the business results as well, and how he could help to convince his team. And he had a lot of very difficult discussions with his team, not only about them losing their roles, but more importantly, how to stabilize the team during that phase, how to keep up with all the emotions going on, because the team was getting very emotional, understandably, because again, change is very different for each individual. And some people had had different worries and that they had to cope with. And helping him to constantly be such a positive change agent was very critical in this whole process. And when I then look backwards at the results, it was a challenging project. It was a very smooth knowledge transfer, but because he managed to focus on the how, that he really stabilized his team and always, helped the team to walk through this and come to this change. And as you can see in the picture, it was not him on climbing anymore, but it was then the team climbing. We didn't have any sick days off during a very long period of time, because people were really committed and followed him and wanted to show to him that they can deliver as a strong team to the last minute. Also, Tim not only acted as a change agent for his own team, but also for the other accounting team leader who weren't even that much impacted, but also within Europe, because he was really sharing his expertise and how to make such a transition successful. And honestly, most importantly, and not only obviously delivering such a challenging project, but more importantly for me and for him as well in hindsight, I hope, it was great to see how Tim grew his leadership skills with this new role. Because it was for him a completely different experience as well to learn during this journey, that he can be a positive change agent and delivering such a big project with excellence as much as possible during such a difficult project. So that was my second example, how to lead change and how to help people, understand, or, that was for me realizing how important a change agent is when you want to lead change, because you need critical people in your organization who are multipliers into the organization and can help you lead the change. And then moving to the third bucket on how to operationalize the change and really getting into execution. And this has two aspects. One is sustained acceleration, especially when we're talking, for example, the digital transformation. You don't want to have just one digital transformation project you want to continue. So you need to sustain your acceleration. But one important thing that I would, want to focus on is how to institute change. What is important from my point of view to really strongly execute your change projects on this journey. And again, let me give you a bit of background. KOTTER announced in 2019 to divest the Wella division to a strategic investor. In Germany, it was a huge undertaking. Globally, nearly 1/3 of the business were about to be divested. In Germany, more than 1,500 employees were impacted, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. 2 big plants, 1 distribution center, and clearly given the size and the complexity, a lot of involvement of Works Council, Supervisory Board, and unions pre-deal closure were expected, and understandable as well. And important to note as well, 1 year before, so basically in 2018, as part of the post-merger integration post the P&G divestiture to KOTTER, all commercial German employees were moved to 2 legal entities. Remember that I explained that at the beginning, the number of legal entities at KOTTER side more than doubled to 13, 14. So we harmonized as part of post-merger integration, we harmonized and merged several legal entities to simplify the organization structure. Again, huge project in terms of reducing complexity. And then more or less 1 year later, it was decided to divest Wella business, where all people were sitting more or less in 2 legal entities. On top, more than 20,000 customer contracts had to be separated. I think in total, 1,000 supplier contracts had to be separated and split. A joint lease contract. Also, 30,000 assets that were sitting on the balance sheet, which is a huge topic for finance people, to properly separate all those assets. So clearly a huge project. And again, it was a critical business phase, base business under challenge. Corona was starting to hit us. As usual, we want to continue to accelerate top line, continue to deliver bottom line results. The key challenge in this project, on top of all these business complexities, all people had to move legal entities. So people were sitting in completely different, 2 legal entities, and they either had to move to a new legal entity to be sold, or vice versa, potentially to another legal entity to be kept and not being divested. And in Germany, a bit of background there, when you move legal entities with all your labor contract, this is official process is negotiated with Works Council, so HR is deeply involved, finance is deeply involved, but nevertheless, there's a risk of employees that they can object. And obviously, neither the buyer nor the seller want that people object when there's such a big undertaking going on, because the buyer wants to have the strongest people following and further driving his brands like Wella. And obviously also KOTTER didn't have an interest to keep too many employees on their payroll, because they wanted to ensure that the buyer gets most of the expertise and that the key people stay with KOTTER to drive the KOTTER business. So how to ensure here that we deliver this project in stretch timing on top again of a base business? Because this project, this divestiture, came fully on top of the base business. And compared to the other 2 examples I gave, was also from a dimension completely different. Hugely complex project, also under a big time pressure. And not only a project, an internal project, merge legal entities, outsource, but also because a buyer had big interest on buying as soon as possible. So there was a lot of negotiations going on. And we'll be not going into a lot of details of this deal, but the key findings there, again, how to operationalize and really execute the change, were 3 findings. Clearly, 1, don't underestimate the resource needs. For any proper change project, you need proper staffing. Always when you think this can be done in parallel, also with mini projects, you need to be clear and reshuffle resources, or at least free up part-time resources. For such a big project, obviously with the divestiture, we had to staff on top at global level, but also on local level. One also a very important aspect, you need to have proper project staffing. Obviously, this was a huge project, but also for mini projects, you need to be clear who is the project leader, who is accountable for delivering the results, who are the key experts working in that project. So the more you spend time upfront on really defining your project staffing and the project leader, the better. And again, don't underestimate the resource needs on your base organization. People are busy with going through this emotional change, so they may not be 150% productive as usual, which is also understandable. But on top, there's a huge complexity coming on top of their base business. So be sure that even though you have very tight profit pressure, that you don't underestimate your resource needs and escalate as much as possible, that you put enough resources onto that project. Next key finding, clearly manage your global stakeholders and priorities. That was one finding as well, especially when you're sitting in a local country. As I said, base business was going on. A lot of other priorities were going on. We were starting, Corona was hitting the business. So, how to ensure that you locally have the priorities right, but more importantly as well, that you manage your global stakeholders. One is don't underestimate resource needs, clearly request help, but also be very clear on where you can only deliver the bare minimum on reporting needs, controlling needs, management visits, presentations, etc., because you really need to focus your organization on the bare minimum. So that was clearly critical for us as well. And don't be shy as a leader as well to speak up and say, hey, we can't do everything at the same time, because we're undergoing a significant change project. And also one concept that I liked a lot, that I stole with pride from a former manager, this concept of no-fly zone. Because for a certain period of time, I think it was half a year, during a very peak period, we said we have a no-fly zone, so no extra projects on top, no management visits locally, no on-top requests we can handle, because we clearly had to ensure that we ring-fence our organization to work on this complex divestiture project. And then the third is clearly stay close to your to-be-retained organization. And that's actually one painful learning that I had to make as well during all change processes. And hopefully I learned then over time that especially the more agile people, younger people, more uncertain people that you wouldn't even think of, they resign the earliest. And those are mostly those people who help you drive, who help you get things done, who have the biggest leadership and really passion towards your projects. So really be sure that you stay very close to your to-be-retained organization. Because the mistake that I initially made, that they think, we anyway have productivity targets, so if we lose 1 or 2 people, too bad, but it's often the wrong people. So really be sure that you stay very, very close to your to-be-retained organization. And also, yes, sometimes retention bonus helps, but this doesn't really, not everybody is taking for money. So be sure that you understand the motivations and stay very close to your organization and help them understand what could be a potential role after such a stressful period of time. And then in the end, as a team, and you can see again my hiking motto, we were able to close the deal in record timings, globally, but locally as well. The team was super exhausted, super tired, but we didn't lose anybody. So luckily, nobody objected, and we could be really proud of delivering such a project in stretch times. So those were my 3 examples on how to create the climate for change, create a vision and communicate, lead the change, and this concept of change agents. Who are your change agents, your multipliers into the organization? And third, how to operationalize the change that you plan for your resources. And with this, happy to get your questions, and I'll hand over to Ilyana.
Thank you. Thank you. You bring up an especially relevant topic today, not only, because a lot of these things are happening, but just change in general. It just feels like it's not longer the exception. It's becoming more of the norm. And I think a lot of the things that you're sharing with us apply not only when, 2 companies come together or break apart, but also just to our daily, things that are happening, changing environments that are happening between workplace and other shifts. So a couple of questions coming in through the chat and also through the Q&A. You talk about these change agents being critical really important to support the process of change and to drive that. How do you choose who the best changes are? Is there like a best change agent? How do you go through that process?
Good question. Actually, in this case, it was because it was such a critical team leader and because the impact for his whole team, that anyway, I spent a lot of time coaching him because I knew he would be critical. And then during those coaching sessions, I realized he will be, once, you know, he's flipping, he can be a very powerful change agent. Maybe another small example, when we had a smaller reorganization projects, I realized that was affecting a lot of lower levels in the organization. I realized I need to get one body that is close to them, who was very controversial and who typically was pushing back a lot. And the same with Tim, because he was very outspoken with his critiques and his comments, and they were often very spot on. So I realized the more you have people that are outspoken, who are highly respected in the organization, and don't need to be high in ranks, but rather have a big network and are respected in the organization and trusted in the organization. So in both cases, I realized once you then convince both of them, and that they see it's not about the what, but the how, that they can be very powerful allies on your side, because they are so trusted in the organization, and so they have a huge multiplier impact into the organization.
You bring up a really good point, right? It's helping people understand the why, right? This is not just the transaction. There's bigger meaning behind whatever change is happening. So helping them understand the impact, the meaning behind it, the reason from a people, from a community, from a benefit perspective can be critically important. So that I think you bring up a great point.
If I may add there, also what I realized to help paint the picture of what could be in it for them. For example, on this case on Tim, that I helped him understand how much he could grow as well when he drives such a significant change project, because he had never done that before. And, that he could benefit from a personal learning curve. He could benefit a lot from that. And that he then could prove himself for a next role afterwards, because obviously he would deliver such a strong project. So I think that helped him as well understand, to understand for him what would be personally in for him if he not only executes, but helps to drive the change personally.
Yeah. And on that note, you talk about in the operationalize the change, right? The third point about staying close to people, that, you need their help. You know that they're important. You don't want them to leave for whatever the reason. So one of the questions has to do with, what were some of the things that you did or that you've seen or that you learned to be able to stay close, especially in these moments that are, every second counts. Like, what did you suggest?
Spend a lot of time with your people, and sometimes, and just take time, really having regular lunches, even though I realized with this team that was impacted, dropping by weekly only for 10 minutes, and that they had the opportunity to download on me. It was sometimes frustrating. Yeah? So I realized how much Tim had to suffer as well, or not suffer, but just be there, be there in person. And then individual, really, I realized, especially on this big change project, I made a list of who are the most critical people that I would like to retain, who are either important for business or for teams, or these multiplies into the organization. And I spent quite some time personally in talking to them, going for lunch, going for coffee with them, and really understanding what made them tick and where their personal voice was. Again, as I understood that Tim was he had just bought a house, I clearly understood that he was under quite some pressure as well for him, because, hey, he knew he needed a job. Yeah? So the discussion with him then was slightly different, that I helped him understand, hey, he may still have a future, or I couldn't promise anything at the beginning, because either for the external labor market, because he would deliver such a great project, or he stays internally because he had delivered such a great project. So that for him, I helped him that despite he had just bought this house, it probably would not have such a big impact, but rather how he delivers such a project. But spend personal time with your people.
Yes. And that can be challenging for a lot of people because they feel that the time is exactly what you don't have, right? In these moments. And in those conversations, and I've been through that myself, and right now there's a lot of talk about the importance of transparency through those changing moments and through those conversations, because there's so many things that happen that because of confidentiality, because of negotiation, because of the sensitivity, the sensitive nature of things, you cannot communicate to people. You wish you could, but you can't. However, people do expect the transparency to be able to keep that trust through this process. So how are you able to sort of manage that transparency, but still maintaining the confidentiality and sensitivity through those moments?
Yeah, very good question. And the key challenge is if so I'm a big fan of transparently communicating as soon as possible. Obviously, when you're working in a big company, then you have global regulations, global unions that need to be informed, etc. So you need to be very much in sync there and explain that to people as well, that you cannot just communicate whenever a decision has been made. However, my experience as well is to keep the time period as short as possible, because when you communicate at the beginning, we had one restructuring, we announced it, and then it was postponed. And I think then 1 year later only we executed. And that is a period of time of uncertainty that is clearly too long. And then because people constantly wonder and go through this change of uncertainty. So then rather shorten the period as much as possible, with all respect, but to help people as well, that this period is not too long.
Thank you. And there's many comments of people just, congratulating you. Alex Schneck says that he was in the trenches with you a lot on this and loves your comment about hiring, some of the most difficult team members to get fully engaged. In terms of leaders who are very outspoken, they at least give people a chance to engage and exchange. However, they might see that that's not happening and silently quit. Did you ever encounter that situation, and how do you deal with people and leaders who just silently quit? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, and that's the phenomenon that indeed we underestimate, that it's always, or people quit externally, the people quit internally. And that's, I think, not only part of a change project, but in general, in general, that people, if they're not stretched enough anymore, if they don't get enough guidance, enough time, clear priorities, I think that's a general problem. And again, there, you need to stay close to your people and ensure that you understand where they are and how to best motivate them. But I would say that's a general challenge. But then when you realize somebody has internally quit, rather honestly speak to the person as opposed to avoiding that discussion. I think is sometimes eye-opening as well. When you honestly talk to people, hey, I realize, you're not motivated anymore. How can I help you? But then also help people if you realize that, because if you tolerate it too long, it may have a negative spiral effect on the team members as well. And so it's critically important that you realize if there's too many people, because obviously then doesn't really help on driving change or your results anymore.
Yeah. And how about on that same note, how about people who are just opposed, like, in their mindset and their perspective and their point of view and their personal experience, they're just clearly, they don't see this change from a positive light. Is there a way to get them back on board, or do you feel like it is what it is?
Obviously, it's very much case by case, and in some areas it helped me having those change agents, for example, Tim, to really talk to on team leader to team leader basis and help the other team leader who was maybe not so constructive to help him get into the boat. But then also I realized you need to choose, where to put your energy. And sometimes, especially, rather focus on your organization, on your positive change agents and those who really want to drive change and help you drive positive momentum. And then in some cases, you may decide not to go with those people where you realize, I'm probably not going to change the mindset of this person anymore. But again, also, you need to watch out that you don't have negative spillover effects into your team. And then if this is happening, rather have an open and honest discussion. Hey, I realize, tell me, why are you so negative? What can we do about it? As opposed to not speaking into it.
Yeah. More great comments. Frank is saying that he's gone through, similar experience way back when in P&G, and he really appreciates your thoughts and your undertaking and achievements. So also says thank you about that. We're seeing as well sort of a generational divide, right? From our generation where change happened, but it wasn't as recurring or as much as today. But then we have the younger generations, right? The younger millennials, Gen Z, where basically change is a part of their life. Like every day something new happens. Have you experienced sort of is there anything in change that the approach needs to be seen differently because of this generational divide, and how to support the different generations, especially the younger generations, that this is almost in their DNA?
Honestly, I don't think this is a question of age. Surely it is a question of age when it comes to change with regards to digital transformation, because there I could see that the younger generation in general is much more, born with using apps anytime and much closer to any digital devices, So there I would say younger age helps. But in terms of being open to change, I don't think it's an age topic. You can have very senior guys who are very agile, very open for change, and some younger generation who like to sit on their aisle and don't move. So I don't think it's an age topic.
Thank you. Well, we could continue with this topic on and on, but we're really running out of time. Any closing remarks before we close for today?
Well, as I said, when you're moving into a change project or, think you want to drive change, remember, create the climate for change, lead the change, and operationalize the change, and intentionally invest enough time to plan for such a program and the different stages, and then also take time of your people. Take enough time to take care of your most important people, because otherwise you can't drive the change.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Anke. This was really, really good and wonderful for you to share this great presentation. Doreen is saying great presentation and completely resonates with everyone who has lived through such a change, which at this point in time, I think that most of us in some way or form. Thank you so much for sharing this. We look forward to connecting again in the future. Thank you for that. And let me just, before we finish on, I'll change to my screen just for a couple of announcements for everybody. Please sign up and get involved with the P&G alumni. There's a lot of benefits from being a part of this great community of support with each other. Get involved, sign up for updates, support the foundation. Remember that throughout this month, any donation will be doubled. Partner with us. You see all the different emails that are out there, or just if you have a thought, if you have a comment, if you have a recommendation, send us an email at hello@pngalums.com. This webinar is currently recorded, and it will go live both on our website at pgalums.com, and it will also be available on YouTube. So you'll be able to see it again there, and you'll be able to see all of our past webinars and future webinars as well. So I invite you to subscribe there as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Send us an email, connect with us, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Anke, for your thoughts and sharing your experience with us. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day wherever in the world you are. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.